Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. It's time for a brand new series on this channel. It's something I've been working on for a little while now, and because it takes a lot of work and because if everybody's been following me, I've had a few health problems in the last few weeks, it's just taken a bit of time to get this up and running. But we're going to give it a go now with episode 1, which is the first 5 games I played on the Intellivision. Now, we're going to go through my gaming history here, so I'm going to literally go through every console and computer I ever owned in order, and searching back through the dark recesses of my mind, I am going to remember and reminisce about the first 5 games I ever played on certain systems. I thought it might be a bit interesting, and also it's a way of getting a few other systems into the mix. I still haven't abandoned the Spectrum. It's there, and it's sitting right in front of me at this present moment in time saying, play with me, but you know, it's like I've got to have an idea for a video before I can do one. So at the moment I'm embarking on several playthroughs of different things, so I just want to make sure that there's a bit of variety on this channel, you know, because we want to please lots of people, not just one or two, and also I need to enjoy making the videos myself. That's the most important thing, isn't it? So without further ado, I'm going to discuss the first 5 games I ever played on the Intellivision. Okay, so what was Intellivision? Intellivision was released by Mattel Electronics in 1979 in America. It came out in 1981 in the UK, and I believe my dad bought us one in 1982. Again, not 100% sure of the dates. I mean, at that time I would have been 8 years old for most of the year, turning 9 at the end of the year, so things are a little bit vague in that department. I remember playing on this a lot, and I do remember like the funky control system. It was great. You had to sit quite near to the Intellivision, and the controllers were connected almost like by phone cords of the time, the curly wire phone cords, if you remember. The controller itself had a button keypad and also like a directional disc and a couple of buttons on the side as well, and what you got in each game was an overlay which you could slip in through like a little flap on the controller, and it would overlay onto the keypad, and it would have things like, you know, fire button and speed up and all the rest of it written on the overlays. You've probably seen them. You can buy them for keyboards now with some of the games on the Spectrum, for example. I think some places were selling them for the Spectrum, so they're very cool little things. You used to get them included in every game basically, and that would be telling you like your buttons, so you didn't really need a keyboard as such. So it was very cool at the time, and pretty much ahead of its time, I would say. Intellivision standing for Intelligent Television. So there we go. Actually, at the time, I never knew that. It does say it on the box, so probably didn't look at it back then. Yes, it's a 12-button numeric keypad, 0 to 9, and it had clear and enter. And you had 4 side-located action buttons and a directional disc capable of detecting 16 directions of movement. And then every game came with a laminated overlay that slide into place as an extra layer on a keypad to show game-specific key functions, which was really cool. I really liked it. And yeah, the graphics, obviously, they were on the same scale as like the first Ataris that came out. Obviously, this was brought out pretty much to rival Atari, and they used to share quite a lot of games in common at the beginning. Things like Pitfall, Burger Time, that sort of thing would come out on both. But we had the Intellivision. But we only had it for about a year before we moved on to the Commodore 64. But I remember very fondly spending a lot of time playing this, and this was my first introduction into home video games. So I do remember this very fondly. It's one I'd actually like to add to my collection at some point, but I've never got around to buying one. But I think it will be a lovely thing to add to the collection. I'm not quite sure what they retail for these days on eBay, but I think I'll be keeping my eye open for one for sure. Okay, so the first game I'm going to take a look at is Sea Battle, which was released for £21.95. Quite expensive actually when you think about it. I mean, that's very pricey. I mean, I didn't get involved in buying. I didn't buy one single game for the Intellivision. It was at the age, obviously, where I was like I said, most of that time I was 8 or 9 years old, depending on what part of the year it was, obviously. So majority of that year I was 8, only because my birthday's in December, so obviously, you know, I turned 9 at the end of the year. So, you know, I'm not at the age where I would have been buying the games. My dad was responsible for that, and yeah, I can't quite believe actually there were some games on here that are actually more. I think one we're going to talk about in a minute is nearly £26, so it's pretty pricey for back then, I think you'll agree. But this is one of the games I remember the most, funnily enough, on this system. I think it was the sound effects. I just very much remember loving this game, and not that I'm a massive tactics gamer really, but this game definitely had sort of like a strategic element to it. I'm going to read the review that's in TV Gamer here. There are only very little reviews, so there's not going to be much reading to do on here, but obviously I'll show the magazine off to you anyway, and say if any of you owned these back in the day, it will at least give you a little bit of a memory on that one. So it says, for Sea Battle, still one of the best battle games available from Mattel, as the game is simple to understand, yet the control is quite complex to master. You have at your disposal an entire fleet whose task task it is to occupy the enemy's island on the other side of the ocean. The fleet contains ships with different strengths and varied firepower, and you also have sea mines that you can place at strategic points on the map. There are 2 screens, one a world map and another a close-up view of the area you're fighting in. So that's it for the review. It's not really a review, I guess, but some of these games have stars next to them, so I'm assuming that means it's a good one. They like that one, because if you'll notice, most of them have either nothing, or they have new, or they have preview. So I'm assuming star means that they rate it as a good game. And yeah, like I said, Sea Battle was one of those games I very much remember. Mostly, I think, again, due to the sound effects, due to the graphics as well. It's not the sort of game that I would normally think I would have been attracted to. And I think back then as well, because it was a bit more strategical, I think I enjoyed watching my dad play it a little bit more than playing it myself. I kind of found it a little bit daunting at that age. I know I'll probably get stick in the comments. I've had that before when people gave me stick about saying that The Hobbit was a bit advanced for me at that age, but I stick with that. I still think it was, But Sea Battle, yeah, definitely a great game, and it's particularly if you're into strategic games. And again, like I said, with the Intellivision, you're thinking that you're dealing with an age here where games are not going to be that complicated. But also, obviously, we'll take a quick look here at the overlay so you can see what buttons you got to press in the game as well. We're going to do that for each and every one of these games, so you can see the top buttons there are all your boats. I'm not quite sure what the numbers next to them mean, unless that means that that's how many spaces they can move. Maybe, I'm guessing, on each one. I don't know. Obviously, the aim and the fire there, I think that's the side buttons. So the arrows are pointing to the side then. You've got engage or retreat as well, create, stop, or deploy. And move ships crosshair, that is pointing down to the wheel. So this little overlay would slide in where the number keypad was. So it's very cool, and I'll show you each and every overlay for each game. So overall, yeah, Sea Battle, very good, fun game, early strategy, and definitely a lot of fun and a great memory for me. Okay, game number 2 is Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. This is the one that released for £25.95. Wow, it's very pricey. But I mean, you think a Commodore 64 game would set you back about, I know, anywhere from about £3 up to about £7 or £8. I mean, you could get some that are about 12 or 15 quid sometimes, but mostly you were paying under a tenner for Commodore 64 games. Pretty pricey. I didn't have to pay for them, so I don't really care. That was down to my dad to pay for those back then. This game was a lot of fun. This was my first foray into sort of like a Dungeons and Dragons style game, and yeah, I remember this being a classic. For years I couldn't remember what it was called because I just completely forgot the name. It was only years later that I started seeing Dungeons and Dragons games coming out on like Commodore Amiga and stuff like that, and I suddenly thought to myself, I wonder if it was a Dungeons and Dragons game, because like I said, I was only a young kid back then and I couldn't remember, and I didn't know anything about D&D really in 1982, so maybe I was just a stupid kid, who knows. But yeah. Anyway, let's have a look at this review. Slightly longer, and by that I mean there's probably like an extra paragraph, so I've got a little bit more to read off of here. It says, originally called just Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, which is what I remember it as, this game has now had Cloudy Mountain added to it because there will be more D&D games coming out. Like many of Mattel's best games, this has 2 phases to it. A map phase showing you where you are in relation to everything else, and a battle phase where most of the action takes place. The object of the game is to retrieve 2 pieces of the enchanted blue crown that are guarded in Cloudy Mountain itself. To get there, you must cross smaller mountains, picking up treasures as you go that will aid your journey. For instance, you need a boat to cross a river and a key to open the gate. To reach your goal, you have to overcome various adversaries such as bats, rats, snakes, demons, and the fearsome winged dragons who guard the pieces of crown. Among the best of the 1982 releases, and still an exciting game. This was probably the first game I remember playing. I mean, Sea Battle was the one I remembered a lot for the sound effects and everything else, but this is the first one I remember sitting down one night when I went to my dad's and like him loading it up and me just being absolutely blown away that you could play something like this at home. I remember we used to go to my dad's in the evening, so yeah, we got there and it was like a winter's evening. That's all I can remember. It's very vague, I know, but I just remember sitting down and my dad sort of like surprising us with the Intellivision, and we didn't know what the heck it was, obviously, and then him loading it up, and all of a sudden that was it. We were enchanted, and it looks a very simple game now, but again, a lot of fun. And a lot of times the simple games are a lot of fun, aren't they? Particularly like from retro gaming stuff. We didn't rely on like mega graphics back then to make a game, you know, it was purely based on the way a game played. And I remember as you ran along, the dungeon used to reveal itself, so it used to draw in as you were running through. Sometimes that was quite hard because you would end up running into monsters and stuff. I seem to remember as well, you fired a lot of arrows, and sometimes the arrows would bounce off the walls and come back at you. I always remember that, so you had to be pretty careful. But yeah, a lot of fun, and a game I would probably, if it was easier to emulate Intellivision, I would probably play this through again now, just for the nostalgia of it. A lot of fun. Please let me know in the comments if you've ever played any of the Intellivision Dungeons and Dragons. I know there were a few. This was the only one I remember playing, sadly. I don't know why we didn't get any of the others. Like I said, we moved pretty quickly onto the Commodore 64. I think my dad enjoyed playing them, saw the potential and heard about the Commodore 64 and just moved straight on to that. I don't think we ever got rid of the Intellivision, but it was kind of like we didn't spend a lot of time at my dad's. So once he got the Commodore 64 for us, you know, we were pretty much all over that when we went up there. So poor old Intellivision got relegated to a closet somewhere, and I wish I knew what he'd done with it. I think he traded it in or like sold it at some point, but I would definitely have had that off of him if I knew. Let's take a look as well at the overlay card like we did with the other one. This one's very simple. We've just got arrow directions for the numbers. Again, I'm not quite sure what the numbers mean on the top row, whether that's, I really don't know actually, because you wouldn't move just 1 in one direction and 2 in another and 3 in the other one. So I don't know what that's for. Obviously you've got an exit button, count arrows. I'm guessing that just tells you how much ammo you've got left. Pick up, fairly explanatory. Run, again, explanatory. And direction, so obviously you use the circular direction button to obviously guide your character around. So yeah, great fun game. And like I said, my first foray into Dungeons & Dragons. I'm not sure, you know, if it's anybody else's or whether you guys may have played the board. I've still never played a game of Dungeons & Dragons, like the old board game style of Dungeons & Dragons. I've never played that. So let me know if you're into that sort of thing, because I think I would enjoy a game of that, to be honest with you, but I haven't got that many friends in this area, unfortunately. I hate living here. But yeah, Dungeons and Dragons, a great game on the Intellivision for sure. Alright, moving on to the next one, we have tennis, first sports game. £21.95 this game cost. This review is a lot shorter than the others, so I guess there's not really a lot to say, is there really, about a tennis game. I seem to remember though this being a fun game. You think perspective wise it's a bit of an odd one, considering you're playing it from sort of side on, which you don't play a lot of tennis games this side. I remember playing, I think it was International 3D Tennis on the Amiga, which was kind of almost that sort of perspective, maybe a bit more in the isometric sense, you know, slightly on a diagonal, but still sort of like a side on game. But it's not really the ideal way to play a tennis game, is it? You really want to play up and down, which is obviously like, this was the first tennis game I ever played, and then from that we moved on to Match Point, which played it the right way, in my way of thinking, and certainly that perspective made it a lot easier to play, and also it was a better game, let's face it. But this was my first introduction to a tennis game, and I have to say, the thing about the Intellivision, with it having like 2 controllers kind of built into it, encouraged a lot of 2-player gameplay. So we did used to play this game against each other, and it was a lot of fun. Obviously you could get competitive, as most sports games can, but yeah, I think we all very much enjoyed playing this game. So let's just read this review. It says, Mattel show off their expertise in producing video sports games with this version of tennis. Cartridge is surprisingly realistic and follows all the rules of the actual game. Younger players can't handle the rather intricate controls, which gives older gamers a distinct advantage. Well, thanks very much for judging me back then, but yeah, I probably wasn't very good at it, to be fair. I think my dad was kicking our butts most of the time on it. When you're 8 years old and you're playing against someone who's in their 40s, I guess, you know, you got to think to you, actually, my dad would have been in his 30s then. I don't want to age him too much. Then I guess that, you know, it's not really that much of a surprise, is it? Let's face it. But probably, I guess, the only surprise is for all you guys out there is I didn't put a football game on it. I think most iterations of like the consoles are definitely going to have football games in there pretty much all the way along, because sports games and in particular football games were the first games that I ever bought for systems when I got them. So, but with this one, to be honest, I remember playing the soccer game, but I don't think it was among the first that we had. That obsession didn't start until, you know, the next couple of computers. So just be warned, football games will be coming, but you know, they maybe not be appearing just on this one. So I've given you a bit of a break, but sports games obviously still will feature very heavily, because that's what we used to get a lot of. My dad was a sports nut and we were sports nuts, so you know, that's the games that we generally tend to get, really. Looking at this review here, I'm quite surprised how many Tron games there were. I mean, very popular movie back in 1982, of course it was, but I think that's when it was released. Was it Tron released in 82? I don't know, maybe not, but I'm pretty sure it was 82. But yeah, 3 Tron games there. An American football game as well, but I wasn't into American football until 85, so probably wouldn't have ever got around to playing that one. But yeah, some intriguing games on here for sure. Let's have a look at the overlay. This is a fairly simple one. So the top 3 buttons were all for service. I'm guessing inner. I don't know what inner and outer mean. Not quite sure what that means. Center's pretty obvious. Obviously, inner and outer means inside and outside of something, but maybe it's the service box. I really don't know. But yeah, I guess maybe you imagine those 3 as in the service box. So center would be right down the middle of the square. Outer would be on the outside of the court, and inner would be on the inside. Kind of makes sense then, doesn't it, really, when you think about it? And obviously the side buttons would just swing hard or swing soft. I don't know why you'd ever want to swing soft. I would probably always be swinging hard personally. And then the dial would move the player. So it's fairly straightforward on that one. Nothing too taxing. Definitely remember playing a lot of ding dong battles, 2-player battles on tennis. A lot of fun. I don't remember what the 1-player game was like personally, but if you've got any memories of that yourself, let me know in the comments below. Okay, the next game I'm going to talk about is a game called Star Strike, which released for £21.95, described in this magazine as sci-fi shoot 'em up. What made this game so memorable for me is obviously back in 1980s I was very much a huge Star Wars fan, as I think most kids were. I went to see Empire Strikes Back actually up in London, which was amazing. Like, such a remarkable experience for a kid. That was it was absolutely intense. The first Star Wars we saw on VHS, so that was the first experience I ever had of watching Star Wars. Probably was around about maybe 79, could have been 80, so it was quite, I didn't actually see it when it came out, so I didn't know too much about it until we watched it on video for the first time. And then obviously when Empire Strikes Back came out, absolutely loved it. The reason I'm talking so much about Star Wars is this game very much resembles like the scene from the end of Star Wars, you know, the Death Star trench run. Very much what it used to remind us of when we were playing it, and a lot of fun. Funny enough, I've watched playthroughs of this on YouTube, and people are like completing this whole game in like 2 minutes, which is absolutely crazy. I don't remember like being able to do that, but then like I said, I was a small kid, so maybe I couldn't, but it's absolutely nuts the length of time that people are getting through this game, to be honest with you. But I just remember really loving this one and really feeling like, you know, I was Luke Skywalker in a Star Wars game. I just thought it was amazing, even though it wasn't a Star Wars game officially. It felt like it was, to be honest with you, and that's what made it special to a kid back then. I mean, I had all the Star Wars toys you can think of, and every year for Christmas it was always, you know, I want the latest Star Wars ship, or, you know, every time we'd go shopping. Fortunately, my mum didn't have a lot of money, but every time we went shopping, you know, we'd go down a toy aisle and we'd be able to pick out a Star Wars figure, and that was just the highlight of any shopping trip for me. Sometimes we went to shops that didn't have toy departments, which was really not a good one, but most of the time, yeah, we weren't spoiled kids or anything, but we would get like Star Wars figures, or we wouldn't get a ship. Obviously we'd see the ships and we'd get all excited, but I think the famous line from my mum was always, see what Santa brings you, and that's that would be the end of it basically, if we ever heard that line in particular. But same with most kids, I guess. Anyway, let's move on to the review. It says here, this game closely resembles the trench scene from the film Star Wars. Probably going to say everything I've just said, I'll be honest with you. The aim of the game is to shoot down as many enemy fighters as you can whilst you bomb the 5 missile silos below you. When you do, the enemy Death Star disintegrates and you are given a fanfare. I can see actually now why maybe people are finishing this game in 2 minutes then. It was fairly simple. See, I don't remember it as being fairly simple, but you know, I guess when you are 8 or 9 years old, I guess you're probably going to think it's the most complex thing on the planet, aren't you? I reckon if I ever managed to complete this game back then, I would have thought I was a genius, but you know, so this is certainly a cartridge to get if you're a space gamer or you fancy yourself as Luke Skywalker. So it doesn't really say if they think it's any good or not, but I certainly remember it being fun, especially for a kid who is obsessed with Star Wars. That's without a shadow of a doubt. That's definitely why this game stands out for me, was the whole Star Wars resemblance, even though, you know, officially, like I said, not a Star Wars game, but it felt like it. Let's have a look at the overlay. This is a fairly simple one, isn't it? So the side buttons are your laser and your bomb. You've got a direction on the pad, and then you've just got 3, well, I think that's 3 warp buttons, because I don't know what the ones are with just stars on, unless they are like, you've got warp 1, which is 3 stars, warp 2, which is 2 stars, warp 3 is 1 star. Don't know why that is. And then you've got these stars. So I don't know. I don't know what that is, to be honest with you. I'm sure if you had the instructions, you could read it. If you've still got an Intellivision, and maybe you can let me know in the comments. But did you ever play Star Strike when you were younger? And that's a question I definitely would like an answer to, if you remember it. I mean, I don't know if any of you guys have ever played Intellivision or not, but I'm sure if you're massive into retro games, there's going to be some of you out there that have. And I'd be very intrigued to know if you ever played this one. And the last game of the 5 we're going to talk about is skiing, or I think it was called US Team Skiing. skiing in America, but pretty sure the UK version was just called skiing. That's what I remember it as anyway. Another one that was £21.95, and fun. Funny enough, back then we used to play a lot of video games skiing. We used to watch Ski Sunday every week. It used to be a bit of a staple in the 1980s. We did watch a lot of skiing for some reason. I definitely don't watch it at all anymore. It's like back then, for some reason, we used to watch quite a lot of it in the 80s, and we had this skiing game which I really liked. And funny enough, it's a bit of a spoiler alert for the next video, but in my first 5 games of the Commodore 64, there's also another skiing game. So it was definitely something that we enjoyed playing back then. And yeah, I don't quite know why, to be honest with you. Well, I think skiing video games were quite fun actually, but this one and the one on the Commodore 64 were the only ones I really remember playing. I think I played Horace Goes Skiing when I got a ZX Spectrum, but I don't really remember that much about it. I think in terms of like actual skiing games, these were better, so maybe that's why I remember them the most. But I certainly remember playing a lot of this, and I remember it being great fun to play as well. Let's have a look at the review. It's not massive again, probably average for what we've been reading. It says, one of the better skiing video games available at the moment. The idea is to complete the slope through all the slalom gates to the finish posts at the bottom of the hill. To do this, you need really fast reflexes and a quick disc finger to avoid colliding with the gates, the trees, the moguls, and so on. As with nearly all Mattel sports games, you receive rapturous acclaim at the end. Oh, that's nice, isn't it? You want a bit of appreciation for what you've just gone through. Yeah, like I said, this game was a lot of fun, and I don't remember if it was 2-player or not. I guess it probably was, but I don't see how you can really play like 2 players as such on a skiing game. I can't remember if any of these games were like multiple players, if like they're level 3 or 4 or whatever, or whether you could just play 1 or 2. I have really great memories of the Intellivision, and really vivid memories of the games, but apart from that, I don't really remember too much about, you know, whether they were 1 or 2 player games. The nuances, I guess, of the games I don't remember as much, but that's probably down to an age thing. Like I said, when I started to get a bit older and a bit more into this stuff, like in terms of like learning about it and stuff, that's when the memory started to stick a little bit more, I suppose. Let's have a look at the overlay. This definitely is the most simple overlay we've had so far, because you've only got the side buttons really. It doesn't even bother to tell you direction down the bottom. It just literally says edge or jump. I'm not sure what edge means. It might have been like if you go off the edge of your skis. I don't know if that makes you go quicker or slower, or makes you like sort of glide around corners or whatever. Jump, self-explanatory obviously. And I guess the numbers did nothing. I don't quite know why they bothered to highlight the numbers then, really, to be honest with you. You might as well just left that blank. Have a nice picture of a skier on there. But yeah, that's definitely the most simple one so far. But I guess skiing, you just go down the hill and you jump over objects, don't you really? I mean, it's not much to it, I suppose, really. It's not like you need a turbo boost and all the rest of it. Although I guess you could have a button that speeds you up. I'm pretty sure you did on the Commodore 64 one. We'll cover that next time around. I'm looking forward to talking about that, because it's a game I haven't played on the Commodore 64 for such a long time. So for gameplay wise, I'm going to play a little bit of it on the C64 Maxi, and yeah, I'm quite looking forward to that, to be honest with you, when I get around to it. But anyway, for now, we're still on the Intellivision, and definitely skiing was a fun game. Let me know, again, as all these games, if you've played it before, particularly if you are in the US maybe, and let me know if it was called US Team Skiing and whether it was different like to this one at all, or whether it literally was just a name thing, because obviously I have no idea. But yeah, definitely a fun game. Probably my favourite out of the sports games on here. I put it on last though, simply because I think we played tennis, or we had the tennis game first. Pretty sure we added the skiing game afterwards. But yeah, none of these games are in any kind of order in that sense, just, you know, what I remember them from. But yeah, another really fun, great game on the Intellivision. So there we have it. That was the first 5 games I ever played on Intellivision. And that list again was Sea Battle, Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, tennis, Star Strike, and skiing. I hope you enjoyed that little trip down memory lane. I don't know if you guys ever had an Intellivision. Let me know in the comments if you did. Obviously, it's quite hard to find decent magazine reviews for games from that time. Actually, the magazine, as I said, I'd never recognised before, never seen it before, as far as I remember. I remember vividly buying Crash like about a year or 2 later, but maybe that was just a little bit before my time of sort of remembering video game magazines and such. I don't know if we ever owned one, to be honest with you. Quite a cool magazine, actually. Quite nice. I liked looking through that, and it just adds a little bit of context to the games, doesn't it? Rather than just, you know, listening to me waffle on about the games. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. Something a little bit different. I hope you will stick around for the series. I've actually got 25 parts planned for this series, so if all goes well. Thanks very much, everybody. Hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget, as ever, to pile in on the comments. Let me know if you had an Intellivision in the past. Let me know if you've ever played any of these games, and let me know, obviously, your 5 if you did have an Intellivision Intellivision, your first 5 games that you ever played, and what you thought of the Intellivision overall as well. I really have a lot of fond memories of this one. Like I said, my first introduction into home video games, and it got me obsessed. So that's all I can say. It's responsible for everything. Probably for this channel as well, if I'm honest. Thanks a lot, everybody. Take care. As ever, thanks for your support, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye for now.